Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited.
Lauren, of all days, Dietitian Day, I'm sitting with one of my favorite functional dietitians. I'm so excited to be here.
It's so fitting. I know. It's
perfect.
Hump Day, Dietitian Day, Nutrition Month. I mean, what
Women's
else?
Month.
Women's Month.
It's our day, month, year.
It is our celebration.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so excited to talk with you about histamine and about its role in mast cell activation syndrome and long COVID and all of these other places that we can take histamine and how it relates to our health every day. So thank you so much.
Yes, I'm so excited because this topic is so misunderstood. And this is a group of people who have been so misunderstood, who are afflicted by these conditions. So I'm so eager to give hope and answers to people.
I think that's the big key is the hope, right? Because I know with a lot of individuals that even have like MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, they're just told like there's nothing you can really do about it, right? It's kind of almost like IBS in a sense, right? And so I think that this conversation will provide them with those answers and direction. So why don't you just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself and just introduce us to you?
Absolutely. So I am a functional registered dietitian. Name is Michelle Shapiro. I am born and raised New York City girl. I have historically worked with clients on kind of three conditions: anxiety, gut issues, and how do we lose weight in a loving way? And that's the middle ground I've kind of lived in, is how do we bridge the gap between body neutrality and if we want to make functional nutrition changes. And I'm a functional nutrition purist. I love functional nutrition so much. I think I had a personal health issue with all of these, as we all do when we're functional dietitians. And then in the recent years, I really started feeling much more sick, and it was very odd because I already knew how to deal with anxiety, gut issues, and this was so a part of my weight loss story. I lost 100 pounds over 10 years ago, and then I really didn't have answers for these new conditions that were coming up. So I've become really vocal and really expressive about long COVID, mast cell activation syndrome, POTS, and hypermobility, because even for myself, who's connected to some of the best functional medicine doctors, the best naturopathic doctors, functional dietitians, I couldn't find answers anywhere online for what I was experiencing. So I'm extra eager to talk with you today about all of this because of that.
Yeah, no, and I think that when we have that personal story, it helps us not even understand it from like a science textbook standpoint, right? But from like the emotional integration, which is such a big piece of the work that we do with clients and patients and in the healing process, right?
100%. Yeah. And it's so fascinating because these conditions, this cluster of conditions, we call it like the triad, which is hypermobility, mast cell activation syndrome, and POTS. They all are driven by nervous system dysregulation. So I joke and say they're kind of like an allergy to stress. And if you don't have hope with these conditions, I'm going to scare people a little bit, you will get worse.
Yeah.
So you have to be really vigilant with having hope, which sounds odd, but they are conditions of the nervous system. So they are very responsive to hopelessness.
Yeah, no, that's a huge piece. And I think a lot of people that have these problems, these conditions, they notice that when they are under stress that they flare, and that's a big trigger for them, right? So just introduce us to what is histamine in general. What are we talking about when we're talking about histamine?
Absolutely. And I'm going to take you one step back behind histamine and talk about what even is a mast cell. So there are these highly intelligent cells within our connective tissue all over our body called mast cells. They respond to when there's any sort of injury, inflammation, whether it be, again, psychological or physical, they are there to protect us. And they will basically send these messengers out to different parts of the body to do different tasks. One of the messengers they send out very frequently is histamines, and one of those that become very tricky symptom-wise for us. The interesting thing about COVID specifically is that there's a receptor on the mast cell called the ACE2 receptor, and COVID attaches directly onto these cells. And these cells are very nervous system embedded and immune embedded. So they really interact in both ways, which is unfortunate symptom-wise. Histamines are these excellent, very necessary messengers because what they do is they open up our blood vessels. They do something called vasodilation, which is opening up those blood vessels so that if we have kind of an immune issue, all those immune cells can get there, all those nutrients can get to the site. And histamine has many other functions as well, but one of them that becomes tricky is this opening up of our blood vessels, because then we don't get good blood flow, which can cause dizziness, it can cause heart palpitations, changes in heart rate, really, really uncomfortable and what feels like life-threatening symptoms, to be honest with you. And then classically, we think of histamines as causing like allergy-like symptoms. So it can be tightening of the throat, watery eyes, congestion, and then rashes people often see. But these conditions all kind of look like other conditions, which makes them very scary because you don't know what's going on with you. And I'll tell you, Lauren, when it comes to histamines, I've had clients for years who kind of tapped out of conventional medicine, and you have that too. All functional dietitians, we're kind of the people that people go to when you don't have conventional help.
Yeah.
Now I'm seeing people who are not doing well with functional medicine help. So I'm seeing people who have tapped out of allopathic resources, tapped out of all of modern medicine, tapped out of functional medicine, and have nowhere else to go because a lot of the functional medicine help instigates histamines. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, through this episode. But this is a group of people who have random, ferocious, acute symptoms that have no normal explanation.
Yeah, they're somewhat of a mystery, but histamines in general are a normal part of the immune response,
Absolutely.
right? And
we need
so,
them.
Yeah, so why is it that some people, if this is a normal part of the immune system, some people have problems with these and then other people don't?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's either one of two things. Either you're intolerant to histamines, which means your body is histamine intolerance is the condition that's associated with it, which means that you don't feel good when those histamines are in your bloodstream at all. Or you could have mast cell activation syndrome, which means you just have such constant activation of those mast cells that you're constantly dumping out histamine. It's just too much. And then you also, if you have that, you might not have the proper detox support or drainage support to get rid of them. So it could be one of those three things.
Yeah, okay. And so let's start with the first, as it relates to histamine intolerance. Sure. What's going on here? How does one become histamine intolerant? Are they born histamine intolerant, or does this happen over your lifespan?
That's a good question. Yeah, so I think histamine intolerance is one that might be a little bit more of a like a highly sensitive body kind of reaction thing. So that might be something that might be more innate, or different things in your environment sensitize you to any kind of trigger. So I think all of these are a combination of, really all three of them are a combination of both genetic and non-genetic features. I feel histamine intolerance, if someone is that, they may have been for a longer time and just be a body that might be more intolerant to changes or transitions.
Sure.
When it comes to that middle group of people who are constantly activated, and that's why they're having these issues, that's usually someone who has had a lot of immune problems and a lot of nervous system problems, which means you could have COVID, then mold, and then you have a lot of anxiety, and that bucket just gets knocked over. And then that third group, who's the non-detox and drainers, they might have MTHFR variants. They also might just be the same people get constantly activated. So then your ability to deal with stress declines over time. It's kind of all three of them are with slight differences, too much at once, not enough ability to help, basically.
Yeah. Okay. And what's going on with the role between histamine intolerance and the gut? Because a lot of individuals, and I'm sure you see this because you work with a lot of GI stuff, when they're dealing with gut issues, this is when the histamine becomes a problem for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So two things. First of all, there's a group of people who are reacting to bacteria in the gut at any capacity because histamines will be released in the presence of bacteria. So very funny is that there's foods that are healthy generally, right? Like fermented foods, for instance. People with histamine intolerance or mast cell activation syndrome usually feel awful when they have fermented foods. And that's just because with the presence of bacteria comes a histamine response on top of it, basically. Those foods themselves also can release histamines, and frustratingly, when we eat high histamine foods, the body then responds with more histamines. It's kind of this bidirectional relationship. Histamines in the gut also can affect like our vagus nerve very directly on both our brain end and our gut end. So that can affect gut contractions. And they also are quite excitatory and stimulating. So they can cause either diarrhea, bloating, reflux. There is also a direct relationship between histamines and acid release. Higher your histamines are, higher your stomach acid gets. So, and that goes back and forth too. So a lot of people with histamine intolerance have, or mast cell activation syndrome, we'll call it histamine issues, have acid reflux as a key feature.
Okay, that makes sense. And there's a component of this that I think a lot of people are treated with, which is called DAO. And that's an enzyme, right, that helps break down histamine. Sure. And I think a lot of people are just started, when they are having histamine issues, they're started on DAO. And while that might help, can you explain why that might not alleviate everything?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's one step in the histamine breakdown process where you would put diamine oxidase, DAO enzyme. It's like, it literally says DAO enzyme, where you would take it to help histamines break down. The problem is that if you're histamine intolerant, it doesn't really matter if you're breaking them down because them being there in the first place already caused the symptoms. So I do feel that Dow is an excellent intervention. You take it before you eat and it will help break down the histamine in the meal so that you don't have them lingering, essentially.
Yeah.
I find that to be very helpful, but it is not a root cause solution. It is it's a Band-Aid, but if you're having severe symptoms, a Band-Aid is fantastic. So
Sure.
we're open to that, but it is not everything. It doesn't stop the histamines from their excessive release. It doesn't increase your sensitivity. Decrease your sensitivity to them, and also doesn't completely remove them.
Yeah. And would you say that that's similar to how quercetin works with histamines as well?
Quercetin's interesting because it's also just really working as an anti-inflammatory, and when you're having mast cell release of all of these, there's actually thousands of compounds that your mast cells release. And they're so intelligent that they'll know exactly which one to release for which person, which is frustrating because I say that mast cells show you your weakness. So it's like, my thing is that my nervous system's always on fire. It's like a New York problem, like I'm always.
No, really?
Yeah, I had no idea. So for me, I'll get like tremors. Like that's my symptom. I have clients, they only get anxiety. I have clients who only get rashes. And that'll depend on, is it histamine? Is it tryptase? Is it elastase? Which chemical messenger is being sent out, essentially. Sorry. So it really depends on the person.
Sure. Yeah. So, and I've seen too, and maybe you can explain a little bit more of the connection here, is that a lot of people that have Hashimoto's have issues with histamine. Do you see that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Any autoimmune condition can have a histamine reaction. So histamines come out. Basically, I want to draw this visual of our mast cells. There's a battle on the battleground of our body. Let's say it was an immune battle. Let's say it was a mold. Let's say it was some sort of autoimmunity. Histamines come as a post reaction to that. So most people have COVID and get the fever and stuff. And then the histamine reaction comes like 7 days after because this is your body constantly being prepared for another battle. That's what histamines are. So oftentimes if there's any damage from autoimmunity where the body is attacking itself in some capacity, the histamines come after to like repair and to make sure it never happens again. Basically, that's what the mast cells are there for, is to prevent from threat.
Yeah, and I think that that's important because this is part of like the bigger conversation around inflammation too, right? Is that I think that there can sometimes be confusion around, well, all inflammation is bad. And it's no, acute inflammation is incredibly important. Same thing as this histamine response is incredibly important. Yeah. It's, however, whenever there's like this overload and dysfunction, our body doesn't know what to do with it, that it becomes problematic for us, right?
100%. Yeah. Everything in our body is meant to be exactly how it's meant to be. It's when we have constant and chronic activation of these body symptoms and systems that we get into rough territory.
Sure. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the mast cell activation syndrome piece of things.
Yeah.
I have had patients in the past where they have had MCAS. They've been told that there is absolutely nothing that we can do to be able to help you. Super debilitating, frustrating for them. And part of what we've identified as their root cause that has really worked wonders in terms of their ability to heal is treating the mold. What is the connection there between the mast cell activation syndrome and mold?
Yeah, so this is a really complicated question, and I might we might have a divergence, but like we love each other and it doesn't matter. But so the deal is that with histamines, again, it's really hard to treat these conditions while you're working on your histamines because mold detoxes, parasite kill protocols will instigate massive histamine responses. So if someone is in a very active state of mast cell activation syndrome and their root cause is mold, you can't treat the mold.
Yeah.
Which is not what functional practitioners do. And I know you're so sensitive with your your patients that you would be very specific with how you go about that.
Yeah.
But really any mast cell activation protocol has to be in 2 stages, and most practitioners miss this. Stage 1, you must bring the histamines down first. And then you can focus on getting in there, re-nourishing, getting nutrients back in, vitamins, minerals, macros. And then you can focus on detox and drainage. And then stage 3 is you can start to kill stuff and have fun with that because then you can get in there. Mold is a very common root cause of histamine issues because, again, your immune system and your nervous system are constantly being challenged and activated. So your mast cells are going to be like, how can we help here? What can we do to help? So it's actually a very common root cause. You just can't fix it before you optimize everything else.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's important. You have to take out the insult, right? Which is like this high histamine load that you're talking about. And then the body has to be open to like getting rid of all of this.
Exactly.
And as you mentioned with the DAO, sure, that might help, but if drainage isn't working, and what we mean, maybe you can just explain too what we mean by drainage, because I think that that's very like a functional dietitian term that we use, but maybe the average listener doesn't know what drainage means.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So let's box detox and drainage. Detox being how is your liver in 2 phases having enough nutrients to repackage things and then send them out of the body. The send them out of the body part is drainage. So making sure you're sweating, making sure you're pooping, making sure you are hydrating, making sure you have enough minerals, doing things like castor oil packs, sweating, movement, lymphatic movement. All of those are going to be really important in the drainage part of this equation.
Sure, yeah. And then once that's then done, then someone can start to get rid of some of these like histamine producing bacteria and mold and all these things.
Yeah. If you poke the bear too soon with histamine, you'll pay the price though.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is that, so now I'm seeing clients who are going to like brilliant functional medicine doctors and they're sick. I mean, when I say sick, Lauren, I want to draw this image for you of what a client dealing with mast cell activation syndrome looks like. I've had several clients who have no history of anxiety who end up in mental hospitals. It is that level of intense anxiety. The depressive piece of it, it feels like there's a black cloud over people's heads. There's studies that show with the implementation of Pepcid, people's suicidal ideations go down. An antihistamine for the gut, specifically famotidine, which also was found to be like a huge cure for long COVID. We'll talk about that too. But really understanding that that's just the mental piece, the severe joint pain, dizziness, heart racing. The reason these conditions feel so threatening is because they're conditions of vital signs, right? Like these are like the things you would go to the ER for.
Sure.
But there's nothing the ER can do for you outside of maybe telling you to take an antihistamine or something like that. So it's really severe. And now we're estimating that between 20 to 35% of the country has long COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, what is it, like 1 in 4 people that get COVID?
Exactly. Yeah. 1 in 4 people that get COVID, and everyone's gotten COVID at this point, basically.
It is truly wild. And I don't know if you know this, but I was actually doing some research on curcuminoids, and I was like digging into, I'm like, okay, what is the mechanism behind how curcuminoids work on inflammation? They work through histamine.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, there's really, now I'm coming back and I'm like, is endometriosis a histamine thing? Is this like, there's
everything.
And we know, especially with women's health, there's so much, because as estrogen rises, histamine rises as well. So it's really interesting with my clients, 'cause I know you work a lot with women's health.
Yeah.
A lot of my clients who are atypical for those symptoms, they'll come and say, Michelle, day 9 and day 21, I'm sick as a dog, but I feel great during my period. And I'm like, those are the days that your estrogen starts rising.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting with these clients because, again, every symptom they have is opposite with what other people have.
Yeah.
And there's nowhere for them to look for this information.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit because as you mentioned, there's a huge hormonal piece as it relates to histamine. And I mean, histamine intolerance can even cause irregular cycles and can cause hormonal dysfunction. What do we see beyond just estrogen? Or can you just explain to us, like within a normal menstrual cycle, what this presents as? And then also for someone who maybe is not menstruating, if that might look different.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I think I have a lot of male clients also and non-menstruating female clients who they don't notice cycles and fluctuations in the same way, but they have just they're more responsive to stressors outside of that. So we'll talk about that group first. So they're more responsive to if they get on a plane, if they have any sort of what I would call transitions. Transitions are very hard on a body that's constantly thinking that transitions are threats and will release histamines in that way. They might be sensitive to heat. They are a group of people who, when they like stand up in the shower, they feel really dizzy and nauseous, and then they might get like red splotches on their body from showering. They are a group of people who have highly sensitive bodies, for sure. And then I would say with women specifically, different parts of the cycle, it's exaggerated versions of what you would think of as irregular cycles. It's very interesting, Lauren, because I noticed that like the regularity of cycles within MCAS patients is actually strong. Like they have very regular cycles. They just have torturous cycles. Honestly, I noticed that quite a bit. And it's really, again, during times when estrogen is rising, I see symptoms. And then anytime symptoms, hormones drop, you can see the same symptoms as well. Like when progesterone starts going down also, you notice the same symptoms too, just because the body is not comfortable with those changes and starts reacting to even internal hormonal changes. And those symptoms can really vary. It can be intense pain and cramping. Histamine makes us very pain sensitive. So very unfortunately, migraines around those ovulatory parts of the cycle and ovulation specifically. And also during PMS, again, having more intense cramping, more intense pain, joint pain, a lot of swelling, bloating, diarrhea. And it really depends on the person. For myself, like I notice like day 6 when estrogen just starts to rise is when I get a little bit of a flood. And this is so weird, but because I'm hypermobile, that's actually the day that my joints are loosest. Like, so I'm like, oh, don't squat that day because I'll throw my back out every single day on day 6, every month on day 6 of my cycle. Because there's a relationship between hypermobility and mast cells. So whatever your thing is, you have to be conscious of what your cycle tells you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and so many women are not making adequate progesterone. Like I think one of the biggest issues I see is just women having anovulatory cycles where they're like, I'm having a period, but there's not adequate progesterone because everyone's in the state of fight or flight, or there's like hormonal dysfunction in other areas. And that progesterone liberates histamine, right?
Exactly.
And so if we don't have enough progesterone, then it's only going to exacerbate the histamine problem that's already at play. So
100%.
It is truly wild how I feel like people don't think about the role of the immune system as it relates to hormones, but they're so interconnected. I mean, the whole body is interconnected. And that's what I think is the beautiful thing about functional nutrition is that we look at how all of the systems connect. We're not just like, oh, hey, hormones. Oh, hey, the gut, right? It's like, how is all of this intertwining together?
It just makes me emotional when you even say that, by the way. It's how I feel about functional nutrition, too. I think people have this perception that we are like, here's a test and you get some supplements. And really, what I want clients to hear from this is that practitioners like you, Lauren, when I have a client sitting in front of me, in my head, I am looking at their body and I'm going ding, ding, ding. Like it's almost like the different organs light up. And I know what happens for you, too, where it's like, oh, that's her liver talking. That's her, that's her this talking. And we see like how this connects to this, even in sessions. And then we get really excited too. Because we're like, oh wait, then she'll feel so good if she takes some Vitex or something. Exactly. It's like, that is this thing. I know that this will equal this. And the beautiful part about functional nutrition and about mast cell activation syndrome is you can hit it from the immune system. You can help the gut. You can help the nervous system. Any angle with which you treat helps the other systems come together as well. Totally. We achieve balance through anything that we do.
Yeah. Okay, go back to explaining the hypermobility and mast cells. Tell us about that because no one ever talks about hypermobility.
Oh my gosh, it's so fascinating. Okay, so mast cell activation syndrome is one condition we talked about. There's 2 others of what we call the triad of these connective tissue issues. So it's POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which means
such a mouthful.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, bleh. Exactly. Which means when you all of them are mast cell activation syndrome. It's wild.
Yeah.
Basically, when you make postural changes, your heart starts racing. So here's what happens, and this will relate to hypermobility too. You stand up. If you have histamines constantly active, you're vasodilated, your blood vessels are wide open, which means when you stand up, the blood's going to go down, drop to your feet, and it can't get pumped back up to your heart or your brain. That's why people feel dizzy when they stand up, which we've heard of. I black out when I stand up. And then what happens is your heart goes, oh my God, I need blood. So it says, send me some blood. So it starts pumping really fast. So people with POTS often have very high, fast heart rate, but it's actually from low blood function, low blood flow. So what's really important with the hypermobility piece is that hypermobility is when our joints are loose, essentially. I'd say we're like bobblehead kind of people. Like, my hands are doing weird stuff the whole time we're talking. My knees are kind of bend inwards. And since these are conditions of connective tissue, that's what hypermobility is, a disorder of connective tissue. We can't build connective tissue. The mast cells reside in our connective tissue. So if you kind of throw a joint out of place or you throw something out of place, your mast cells are going to say, there's something horribly wrong here, and then send histamines out. Histamine is one messenger that comes out of mast cells. And I'll tell you, this is fascinating and horrible. But basically, there's another type of compound that comes out of mast cells called elastases. The reason we send out elastases in times of stress is because elastases can break down proteins in viruses. So what they will do is go out to help scavenge, break down proteins and viruses. They also break down the protein in your connective tissue. So if you have an immune virus like COVID, basically your body's going, oh my gosh, I need to help. Let me try to kill this virus, send out an elastase, but it ends up killing your own connective tissue and eating your connective tissue. So then you have the activation from the mast cells, your nervous system's totally freaking out, and it turns into this vicious cycle. So hypermobility is something that you can be asymptomatic with. It's a genetic condition. Or when these things happen, you can become symptomatic. So very commonly, I'll see people with this thing called coat hanger pain, which is common in POTS, which is when you have pain almost like in a triangle behind, right at the back of your neck into your shoulders. And it's because people can't get blood flow there. And that's also because you don't have proper connective tissue lines your blood vessels too. Yeah. So you don't have good blood flow and good blood pump, and that can lead to a lot of pain, knee pain, lower back pain. And these, again, if you go to a chiropractor with these things or a physical therapist, they're going to start adjusting you. But you can't, on a hypermobile body, it's very dangerous to do that because you can throw things out of place.
Yeah. Well, and I know elastase is used a lot for adhesions for women that have like pelvic floor pain and issues with that. And I wonder, and maybe you know this, is supplementing with elastase for someone that has hypermobility problematic potentially?
I would definitely think so. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, it's helping you to break down so you can rebuild.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's how it breaks down adhesions is because it's an enzyme.
Yeah, I would definitely not want elastase for myself. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of pelvic floor issues are also connective tissue related, and then this kind of cycle happens. I consider endometriosis as a condition, by the way, to be an immune condition. I know a lot of us, and I'm sure you do too. And it's definitely a nervous system condition, and it's definitely immunological. So it's definitely mast cell and histamine mediated as well.
Crazy. It's truly wild. I mean, it's
all connected.
It's all connected. It is. Okay, I want to go back to what are histamines found in. You briefly mentioned pickled fermented foods, these foods that we deem to be incredible for us, that for people that have histamine issues are extremely problematic. What else outside of those foods is problematic?
Absolutely. So I'll just tell you also that I really view these people's bodies. I'm one of them. I'm one of these highly sensitive bodies, HSBs instead of HSPs. We react opposite, again, to things that other people do. So when we do things that are objectively healthy for us, we feel horrible. And I give this little story an example. When I went to the Ojai Valley Inn last time I was in Cali on a little fake honeymoon with my husband, because it was like a very short trip. It was wonderful. However, I got on the airplane. I was like, amazing. I'm drinking my lemon water on the airplane. I land. I'm having oranges, all these citrus fruits, which is a concern too. I did a Pilates class. I went in the sauna. I was never more sick in my entire life. I was like, being a wellness girly is not for me. I don't know what happened.
I gotta go back to New York.
Exactly. I gotta get back to New York and be in my dark dungeon. You know what I mean? It's not true. I have light there. But yeah, no, it was like the joy is not for us, you know. But I will say again, citrus fruits are very instigating. I was having fermented foods when I went out there, avocado, banana, strawberries, and I have to give a disclaimer, Lauren. These foods are objectively healthy. It's that your body temporarily is either confusing them as being unhealthy, or they either quite literally have histamines in them, or they release histamines or cause the release of histamines. So it could be that they're high bacteria, or if they're high protein food, it could be histidines in it that gets converted into histamines. But the goal with any low histamine diet is to get you off the low histamine diet eventually. Yeah. But these can be, and tomatoes, tomato sauce, very instigating. Citruses for people in the short term. And then the number one highest histamine food would be like vinegars and other fermented foods.
Yeah. And collagen? Collagen is a histamine
which is hard because you want it with it definitely can be. You also really need collagen if you're hypermobile, so it's like a frustrating thing.
Sure.
You can't it's so weird. You almost can't be like too on the nose. You can't just be like, oh, I need vitamin C, because vitamin C is really helpful for that DAL enzyme to function. It's a component of it and really important, but we can't just give vitamin C because then people in this group react really negatively to supplements.
It's so funny too, because like I think about all these things, and like on Instagram, people are always like, can you share more of what you eat? Can you share more of your recipes? And I'm always like very aware of this, because it's like, I could share with you that I'm eating strawberries, but like I don't have histamine issues, and so many people do. And so like I can't sit here and tell you that strawberries in general are great for everyone, because they're not in all situations, you know?
Right food for the right person at the right time.
Yeah, and I think that's where the like personalized nutrition piece really comes in, is that you have to understand the full body, right?
Yeah, if someone can just hear me saying that there are people who literally can eat a banana and be ill for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It is not a joke. Like, truly, nutrition has to be specialized. And also, we have to understand that it's not normal to just eat a banana and not feel well. It's okay to not be normal. I love being a freak. But then we have to do something about it to help.
Totally. Yeah. And like you said, it's not forever. It's just like a low FODMAP diet, right? Like, it's not forever.
Can't do it forever. No.
Yeah, no.
But I will say, like, this, if I have a client who is, not joking you, in a hospital because of symptoms, they will not eat a banana for a week and be very happy. Like, they're like, I'm fine with going. Like, they would go on it forever. And a lot of them feel really safe on a low histamine diet. But I'm like, you can't miss the nutrients in those foods. We have to go back on it eventually. And that's a delicate process, obviously.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately not something that is being done in these treatment facilities. Like, no one in a treatment facility is screening someone for histamine intolerance.
No, it's very rare. And I would say a lot of people are being treated for POTS, that condition I was telling you about before, and they're missing the histamine piece. So a lot of my clients who have POTS, they go to POTS clinics, but they're not talking about histamines. And I'm like, but that's the root cause of POTS. So everyone's missing it by an inch and then missing it by a mile.
Yeah.
And I find people are not knowing where to go for this anymore. And it's really upsetting to me, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like across the board for POTS, everyone just says, like, eat more salt.
Eat more salt. Basically, the goal with POTS is to just get blood flowing better and a pump, which would be like vasoconstriction. Yeah. My question is, why do you need constant vasoconstriction? Why are you vasodilating? And usually one of the answers is histamines.
Well, yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. Okay, crazy. Okay, histamine and skin rashes. You talked a little bit about that before. And I think that from what I see, at least, there's a large chunk of people where that is their main histamine response, is the skin rashes. We've seen a lot with autoimmunity, that being a huge symptom.
Absolutely.
What's going on? Why is it showing up on the skin?
Yeah, it's usually some level of, again, immune response. Like, under the skin, you have pooling of blood there, or there's like some sort of a battle going on, and then you have recirculation of toxins, and then that's showing up under the skin also.
Okay. And generally with histamine, people know, okay, during this time of year, right? It's March, it's spring.
Sorry to say.
that I have more problems or if they live somewhere in particular that, like, it's more problematic than where they used to live. Is that something that people should be accepting as normal, that they just have these like seasonal histamine issues? Or is this something that you feel like really shouldn't be accepted as normal for anyone?
It's a really hard question. I think our normal is going to be really scary soon because, and I don't mean to, there's fixes for all this, by the way. So it's not, we have help, like help is on the way. Don't worry. I think that what probably people had histamine issues for a long time and didn't understand that was a root cause for them. And so like the level of acceptability is going up and up and up. People with these conditions have to accept that we are going to have times that, especially if you have hypermobility and you have any genetic component, we're going to have times that are going to be a little bit more challenging than others. It's more about managing flares as they come up and then also working on the internals to hopefully not make it as normal as possible. What's normal, again, is like always shifting, but is there work that can be done if you feel like you have seasonal allergies? 100%. There's work that can be done.
And it might be a red flag or a yellow flag that could tell you, hey, this is something. This
Your
is a
immune
whisper.
system's a little jumpy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about the histamine and anxiety connection.
Please.
I know you treat this a lot and you work with this a lot. So why are the two connected and how is this connection happening?
The best questions. So yeah, this is most of my clients' main symptom. Histamine is excitatory and kind of acts like a neurotransmitter. It's a messenger. It's kind of a neurotransmitter in the way that it acts. Some people call it a neurotransmitter, but it is produced partly in the hypothalamus, which we know is the beginning of that HPA. I know you smiled because you thought of the HPA axis, by the way.
You're like, oh, hormones.
Exactly. Yay, HPA axis. The adrenals. So it's a part of that hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So basically, when you kick off a histamine reaction, you're kicking off the entire HPA axis, essentially. So that's one thing. The other thing is that histamines are really there to they're an alarm system too. So they really want to keep you awake. So the experience of having a histamine insomnia night, because insomnia is a very common and this will relate to anxiety. It's a very common symptom people have is insomnia with histamines, is you feel like your eyes are open like this, but you can't sleep and you don't understand why. And it's like this. for hours on end. It's pretty torturous, to be honest with you. Very, very unpleasant. The other sensation that's happening at the same time is often tremors, because again, it's very excitatory and stimulating kind of hormone to keep us awake and alert. It's like, make sure nothing's wrong, is people feel like there's itching under their skin, and it's I call it a zinginess almost under their skin. And at the same time, amazingly, people can get, while all this is happening, zingy, itching under the skin, buzzing kind of feeling. They can get the sensation of there's a black cloud covering their eyes, which is often from lack of blood flow to the brain. So you are at the same time the most exhausted you've ever been and the most awake and really, really anxious and thinking that something horrible is going to happen.
Oh my gosh. So of course you're
not fun.
anxious, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a physical anxiety. So now I can tell where I'm like, oh, that's a little histamine-y. You know, I can feel a physical anxiety because I don't experience anxiety anymore. So for myself, my body really wanted me to be anxious.
Yeah.
I don't experience anxiety as I have in the past because I know how to work with anxiety.
Sure.
So when I feel it though, it's like a buildup that comes, your heart starts pounding, and then you feel like a twitching almost. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So is there something related to the circadian rhythm and histamine? Because I feel like a lot of people deal with these issues more in the evening time.
100%. So yes, there's a 5 to 7 p.m. is when histamines are the most reactive. And then they have a little bit of a witching hour at 3 a.m. also, which is that like cortisol-y time that we think of. It could be a cortisol thing or a histamine thing or both.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah.
Totally crazy.
So this is even crazier. So when I was on this journey and I did have some nights of insomnia and I was like, you know, it was so funny. The night before my bachelorette, I don't like drink. It was like 20 of my friends and we just like hung out and got a chef in the city. It was like not a thing, you know? I was not nervous about this or anything and I was not sick. I was fine.
Sure.
And my best friend was sleeping over and I was up all night and I was just like, I'm awake. And he's like, are you having anxiety and it's keeping you awake? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm fine. Like emotionally, I'm fine. But it's just that these chemicals are running in your body to keep you awake. And I remember during that time, and I didn't sleep for 2 nights straight. And then the third night, my sleep was fine before this. The third night was the actual bachelorette, and I got an IV in the morning, which I so regret because it had a tremendous amount of vitamin C, which can be very histamine-y, a tremendous amount of B vitamins, because I was like, I got to do something. And then I remembered that day that I read a study about Pepcid and long COVID, like Pepcid, that over-the-counter antihistamine that we often associate with stomach acid, not histamines. And it was I think about 15 people in the study, and almost all of them had more than an 80% reduction in symptoms when they took Pepcid. And it was like fatigue, neurological symptoms. And I was like, the acid reducing drug?
Yeah.
So I took a Pepcid that day and I was able to feel so much better. And that's when I started to understand this is a histamine thing. And it really changed the trajectory for me, which is funny. I'm like, this functional dietitian's using Pepcid as the main intervention, but sometimes it's necessary to just bring things down. And Pepcid's actually an intervention I do use in my practice with clients.
Yeah. I mean, it's an antihistamine. That's a mechanism of how it works, right?
It's famotidine. It's the deans are always antihistamines. Yeah. In the gut specifically.
Yeah. Well, and histamines, they impact the gut so much. Like you mentioned, diarrhea is like one very common symptom. Acid reflux,
exactly.
Right? So
yeah. And most potently and interestingly, Pepcid acts not only in the gut to reduce the stomach acid, which then has this cycle with histamine. There are studies that actually found its relationship that it directly acts on the vagus nerve, which is like insane. And it prevents the cytokine storm during COVID. So it's just like, it kind of became this really random cure-all for, I mean, it doesn't fit, nothing fixes anything. You have to do all the work at the same time. But symptom-wise, I've had clients who have gone from, I had one client, 21 nights of insomnia before she came to me. She took Pepcid and she slept through the night. This is different for every person, by the way. Some people react to nettle leaf tea better than Pepcid, but I have found it being a particular intervention that is insanely amazing for anxiety and insomnia.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I think that's also important to note too, because some people, like, what I'll have them do is if they're having like headaches and some of these symptoms right before their period, or they're having like this sleep issue at nighttime, I'll say just try antihistamine. That way you can see if this is a histamine issue, because if that, I'm not telling you to take that every day, but if that works, then we know, okay, what's the source of why this is working, right? So
100%. Yeah. So I'll tell you that in the kind of initial protocol that I have with clients who have extremely severe MCAS symptoms, they're probably using more than one antihistamine for a couple months. And I have people who have clients on, practitioners who are incredible at treating this, who have clients on like 5 at a time. And I'm not recommending people do that at all.
Yeah.
But that initial stage, you have to bring histamines down whatever way you can. Some people react not well at all to medications, and they need more gentle interventions. But if they do, I'm open to any tool that works with people.
Yeah, especially if their symptoms are as severe as we're talking about.
I'm not
right?
letting, I don't have any morality around like, oh, I'm not going to use any kind of medication because I'm too natural. Like, if I have a client who's suffering, I'll use anything we have.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important for people to understand that there's a treatment phase, right? And then there's like a maintenance phase of what to do when you get these triggers, right? So I don't want you to share all your secrets, but can you just tell us from someone that like lives with this every day, now that you have improved your histamine issues that you were experiencing, what does that look like for you if you have a bad day? Like, are you just pulling out a couple of tools to be able to help your body cope?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's such a good question. And I want you to understand, for people listening, I was at a point where I was in a neck brace because of my hypermobility. What kicked this all off was actually injury at a chiropractor's office. Oh. If you have hypermobility, which means if you're a person who's been told you're double jointed, you're like 99% hypermobile. I went to a chiropractor, did not know I was hypermobile. They dug into my neck and dislocated like joints in my neck. I mean, I couldn't see straight for months. I was seeing clients in a neck brace. I said to my clients, like, I love you. I don't want to miss the session with you. I'm going to be propped up against this wall with a neck brace on. If I stood up, my heart rate was going up to 180. It was like the scariest time in my life because I didn't know where to look. One of the places I looked was my amazing trainer, who is a chiropractor who specialized in hypermobility. So my symptoms will come as POTS, as MCAS, or as pain, like hypermobility kind of symptoms.
Okay.
I joyously am here to tell you also, I came on this trip. We're in California right now. Not one symptom. I had no symptoms. That is very hard with these conditions because they hate flying. The pressure changes, the being in weird smells, chemical stuff. So I do believe healing is possible. But what I do personally is the second I notice a symptom, I'm like, okay, got it. I notice a symptom, breathe into it, acknowledge it. I stop what I'm doing. Okay. I notice my heart racing. Okay. I notice my hands are a little shaky. Got it. I'm acknowledging the symptom and not reacting to it, which is the art of healing with all of this. Cannot heal if you don't heal the nervous system. And that doesn't mean fancy meditations. It means being able to tolerate symptoms and still say, this happened and I hated this, but I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to get through this. This is temporary. This is temporary. So the first thing I do is that, and then I go, is this like a POTS thing? Is this a histamine thing? Do I need nettle leaf tea for the histamines? Or do I need to put on compression socks for the POTS? What do I need? And you get really good at kind of managing flares and understanding. So my flares, where it used to be that, honestly, like I couldn't swallow for some time, now it'll be like, actually it's funny because I hear my voice being a little raspy today and I'm like, all right, we're going to drink some tea after this. I noticed it. And thinking about what is this symptom? What can I do with it? And how do I tell myself this is temporary when it does not feel temporary? And what I'm telling people to do is so much easier said than done. The goal is to make the flares smaller and to make the flares less intense and to make them less frequent and to handle them with a lot of love, but it's really, really hard to do. And I know it's hard to do.
Yeah. Well, I think regulating your nervous system is probably one of the hardest things that we try to teach people.
Especially when your nervous system's on fire, because these are disorders of the nervous system. So your nervous system is on fire during these times.
Yeah, exactly. But as you're saying, it's so important because if you let the nervous system win almost, right? The battleship just takes off.
You can lose in these conditions. I'm not going to, we're not going to let anyone lose. I'm not going to let anyone lose. And fight. Even someone listening to this right now, Lauren, if they hear that there's hope, their nervous system changes. Yeah. That's the really fun work that we do too. What people I think don't realize is that coming to a dietitian session and having someone sit and watch you have mirror neurons firing off. You're healing from sitting in that room, from sitting in that virtual session, whatever it is. In the moment that your brain opens up and goes, I might be able to heal, you start healing. That's it. And it sounds corny, but if these are conditions of the nervous system, there's only one way out. You have to treat the nervous system. You can't take fancy supplements for this because they'll instigate a flare anyway. Yeah. The only way out is through. And I have faith for every single person with these conditions. I think there's no one who can't heal. Not one person.
It's so funny. My husband and I were literally having this conversation at dinner last night because we're both in like the healer space. And I was telling him, I was like, I can tell from the initial call with a prospective client if they're going to heal based off of their desire to do so, their openness to want to heal, to being receptive to heal. Because if someone is receptive to healing, they will heal.
You're so right. I mean, in that moment again, where I was in a neck brace, I couldn't stand up. You know, I tell the story, Lauren, to very few people, but I'm going to talk about it on your podcast. But it was at the point where for me to even like go to the kitchen to get food, I had to put a computer chair next to the bed, sit in the computer chair, and then push it with like my hands holding on to things because my legs were in so much pain. And I actually said to myself in that moment, like, I don't know if I'm making it through this. It's the first time I've ever said that. I was like, if it's like this forever, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. I don't know what it looks like to not make it through it. And I'm not saying it was any sort of suicidal ideations or anything, but I was like, I like don't know if I'm going to get better, really. Yeah. And then one day I said, don't ever say that again. And I was like, you don't have the privilege of thinking like that. And if people are dealing with these conditions or any other severe conditions, we don't have the luxury of thinking like that. Not for a minute. You cannot think like that. Yeah. If you hear your brain doing that, it's a no. Yeah. We're choosing a different path basically, which is what a lot of these limbic system retraining programs do is help the brain to just kind of reroute when we're in those moments. But you can verbally say, stop. Now I'm going to picture myself healing. And the day that I decided I'm never going to talk like that again is the day that I started healing. Seriously.
So powerful. Do you use these limbic system retraining tools?
Yeah, I love the Gupta program.
Yeah.
I think it's really fantastic. People love DNRS and Primal Trust. Both of them are fantastic. And I think that on these healing journeys, working with us, we do a little bit of limbic system retraining without realizing with our clients. However, a formal program is probably the first place I have clients look. Again, because these are disorders of the nervous system. You cannot treat them without treating the nervous and limbic system.
Yeah, that's powerful. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Okay, where can people start with all of this conversation around histamine? Like, is there certain testing that they should be doing? Is it working with a practitioner that can put them through a protocol? Is it starting to become aware of how much histamine's in their diet? Like, where would you say is the best place for someone to really start?
I love the question. Yeah. So what I would do first is actually have people inventory every single part of their health. So I want people to draw a human body, even if you're not, I'm a horrible artist, draw a stick figure and then draw lines next to it and write like, I have headaches, I have anxiety, it happens at this time, and just kind of look at that. And then I want you to kind of flip the page over and I want you to write sleep, lifestyle, breath work, movement, food, nervous system, and write down what's going on with you, and it'll become so obvious what those lifestyle deficiencies are. I also have to mention something. Because these are disorders of two things, the nervous system and connective tissue, you have to build muscle. There is no way out but through. When it comes to deconditioning is the number one issue with all of these things. You have to strengthen your connective tissue and you have to strengthen your resilience. So I would be keeping that in mind with movement. Inventory where you are before you even go to a practitioner, because then you can go and say, here's my deal. Here's the whole of me. Here's what I'm working with. And even if you don't go to a practitioner, just have a starting place for yourself. I also have clients write a whole timeline of their health from beginning to end. Here's where it started. Here's where things got weird. Oh my God, things got weird after I had COVID. Things got weird after I moved into that moldy house. And then you can start to see your own root causes. And it's really important to do that. So my first step would be inventory yourself. Then I would say you might want to work on the nervous system piece first, even before going to a practitioner. That could be something silly like meditation, or it could be doing some sort of understanding the voices in your head and how, and just starting journaling that and seeing how they act and seeing how you are in a state of fear. And it makes sense because your body's in a state of fear. So really the first step would be auditing and inventorying. Just doing that and seeing yourself, you're already pushing forward. And then when it comes to mast cell activation syndrome, the testing is pretty rough. It's really hard to catch and test. It really goes off of symptoms and how you react to things. There are like serum tryptase and serum histamine or a urinary methylhistamine is a way to potentially see. But these are people who are very resistant to interventions and also resistant to testing. We don't really understand what's going on. However, like you said, working with a functional provider, you could see mold is a root cause, but you're having histamine symptoms, we'll know the path forward.
Sure.
And then I would just say also eating foods that feel good, noticing patterns in the foods that you're eating, and eating really slowly with purpose and with a really good posture would be a good place to start too.
Posture, huh?
Yeah. I mean, if reflux is a huge issue and we're eating like this, how I've probably been sitting this whole time, by the way, I'm sure. If we're eating like this, you're literally pushing acid up, right? Like think about the function of your organs and the placement of your organs.
Yeah.
We all sit eating like this, especially when we're stressed and we don't digest food well and we're feeling poor. We're like, let's get through this kind of. Eating with a good posture, it just invites also a better nervous system response to food too.
Love that. I love that. Okay, awesome. Michelle, you are such a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for all that you've shared.
Thank you so much.
This is, I know, going to help so many people because this is a population of people that are really struggling, like you mentioned, and no one can help them. Or there are people out there that can help them, but
it feels like no one can help them.
It feels like that, right? And so thank you for just first and foremost providing hope to these individuals.
Oh, they're going to all get better.
Yes.
Every single person who's listening to this, if you just listen to this, something changed in your nervous system. You already did the thing. You did it just by listening to it. If you made it through the whole episode too, oh my God.
That's true. If you have to go back and rewatch.
Exactly. A couple times. Exactly. Yeah.
Tell us where they can learn more about you, your practice.
Sure. So I am on Instagram at Michelle Shapiro RD. I don't have like a fun, gorgeous Instagram. It's just me ranting a lot. So have fun on that or don't. I work with clients in private practice. I have a couple amazing practitioners who do that too. And now they're all getting trained specifically in MCAS and these conditions. So if that's something that you need the support wise, but I think Lauren's got you anyway, by the way. And then also I am working on a place for these people called it's going to be called the Highly Sensitive Body Hub. And it's going to be a wealth of information, resources, videos, recipes, exactly kind of just that landing place for people. So kind of stay on my Instagram to see, because I wanted to make a low cost offering for people versus working with someone one-on-one where they can just get that hope and have all of these resources in the same place, workouts for hypermobility. If you're any kind of piece of that triad, or if you just feel like you're a person whose body operates differently than other people's, that's going to be a safe space for you.
Yeah, I love that because I think that just having that community too and knowing that other people are dealing with the same symptoms as you can be so helpful.
100%. Yeah, it just, when I was dealing with these symptoms, I was like, why feel bad day 9 cycle? Like there's nowhere to find that. It doesn't make sense that information would even exist.
You should feel good, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's like, everyone's like, my period's done. Thank goodness. I was looking on Reddit mostly. And then I was like, okay, someone said they feel bad during ovulation. A couple people commented. I'm like, why ovulation?
Yeah.
Why do they feel weird during ovulation when it comes to histamines? And then I started to make the estrogen connection. So I had to work my way back. And now I just want to not gatekeep. And I'm like, just take the playbook. Yeah. Please. Because I want to give the information that I didn't have that I really needed because the suffering is so high, Lauren, and the answers are so low.
Yeah.
And there's no need for it. We have the information already.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you
thank
sharing
you so much.